Welcome all the viewers out there to the Arraya Insights Expert Q&A. I'm Chuck Kiessling, the Senior Director of Infrastructure Presales at Arraya, and hopefully one day I'll learn to say infrastructure properly. And with me in the studio today, I have Tony Shaw, Senior Solutions Engineer on the Workspace team, and overall Microsoft 365 migration SME, and from what I can tell, a pretty nice guy. So thanks for joining me today, Tony.
Thanks for me on today, Chuck.
So I want to kind of talk today a little bit about a topic that seems to become has seemed to have become very popular in the industry, especially when we're talking Microsoft 365, and that's tenant to tenant migrations. Seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions focused on new purchases and company partnerships and things like that. So that's where I want to focus a little bit today, and I'm going to start by asking you an initial question. What are some gotchas? Right, when we're talking M&A, what are gotchas for tenant to
Sure.
tenant?
I think you first have to just back it up just a second, right? M&A really, if you really want to look at its functionality, is just a cross-tenant data move. That's really all it is, right? It's customers undergoing a merger and acquisition that just have to, transfer the owners of the data, right? That's all we're really doing. So in a nutshell, it's a simple process. But when you start breaking that out open, right, you have so many different things in there. And for the gotchas, hopefully we go through a discovery phase, right? That's like, what type of licenses these users have, what type of workloads are they using, what's the destination, are there going to be app issues? And so these are a lot of things that we run into, at least in the initial discovery phase. It's like all the workloads in use in one tenant may not be utilized and licensed in the other tenant. So how do we get them licenses over? How do we get the users to understand the workloads are changing, right? So a lot of it is the end user experiences, shared links, OneDrive, SharePoint sites, all these are going to have to change. And so how do we relay this to the users? And then for the admin side, right, you have, different administrative policies, DLP, e-discovery. How do we bring over these DLP policies, these labels, MIP labels? DLP, do they have, different types of compliance in the original tenant that they may or may not have to apply to in the new tenant, right? So, and then there's other things, right? Do we consolidate them or do they stay separate, right? Sometimes we'll have a super large conglomerate that has separate business identities. So they're absorbing the company, but they're maybe not taking on the name, right? So we kind of look at that, or are they truly absorbing them, and consolidating? And that's typically our recommendation, right? Because you have your best collaboration experience, you have singular branding, and then you have a unified experience across all the 365 workloads. So that's kind of how we do that discovery phase initially, right? And then we start going through the actual migration challenges, right? Especially if we're doing a lot of data, right? The migration, the throughput of the migration, right? The end user experiences. What tool are we using? Are we using like the Microsoft, cross-tenant migration tool? Are we using a third-party tool? Is there some type of throttling we have to worry about for data throughput? And then what does the end state look like for both the divesting company or the company we're coming from to the new merger? So that are all the kind of things we look at in a merger and acquisition as a big whole.
Yeah, I mean, what about things like the devices I'm using, whether it be mobile, laptop, or something in between?
Right. Again, we come from, in looking at these, are they AD joined? Are they hybrid Azure AD joined? Are they only Azure AD joined? So what are we doing with these devices, right? Are we unjoining them from the existing domain and just rejoin to the new domain, just the Active Directory, maybe using like ADMT or something, right? Or is it like an Azure AD to Azure AD, like cloud to cloud migration, right? So where we can the users can join or unjoin their devices by using, the work my school location on the desktop. So we look at that, and then obviously for devices like iOS and Android devices, do we have to unenroll a devices from being managed and then re-enroll into the new tenant? Do they have multi-factor authentication, so they have to re-enroll in their MFA tokens? So them are all things we definitely have to consider as on the device side as well. It's not always just data only. And then we can kind of move into security things, right? Maybe you go from a high security to a very low security tenant, or vice versa, very low security to a high security, right? Where they do have two-factor authentication and everything. They audit all the mailboxes, they audit all the security logs and the user logins. They have conditional access, so they named locations, right? So they can only log in from certain states, certain IP addresses, certain countries, right? And maybe certain countries are banned from being logged in, right? So we talked earlier, about maybe the hotspots of nefarious like spamming and stuff, right? So Russia, China, North Korea, we can singularly block those countries from allowing sign-ins into your Azure tenant. So these are all things we kind of introduce them with what bringing in new identities and how can we really help their security footprint and security posture and make the most out of that.
That's all a lot of good information. As part of this and as the closing, going to ask you a quick opinion and a question. Top three things that you would recommend to a customer, whether it's a new tenant, a merger, an upgrade, consulting, whatever. What are the top three things that you always recommend no matter what?
So no matter what we do, bring in a brand new tenant, understand your security footprint, your security posture, right? Because if any time you're compromised, right, then you're going to have issues all around. So you're losing your brand recognition. So right, we're gonna if they're going to do email, we're going to recommend like DKIM, DMARC, SPF, right? Because that's protecting your brand. That's making sure somebody can't just spoof your email as you and become like a spammed email. So we always recommend making sure your DNS settings are correct. Especially within your Office 365 mail environment. Secondly, we always recommend enabling multi-factor authentication for all the users. They may not be licensed for conditional access, right? Because that's this extra license. But there is the base level multi-factor authentication that's available within Office 365. So at worst, we recommend at least turning that on. And if you don't want to turn on at least for that, turn it on for privileged identities, right? Global administrators, Exchange administrators, anybody that has extra power that can do things in your environment. And then lastly, set up some analytics, set up logging, like security logging, so you can see who's logging in, where they're logging in from, mailbox auditing, so you can see who's accessing mailboxes or if they're sending mailboxes or if a forwarder was set that they didn't know. So I'm going to really have three things we really got. That's the biggest thing, that security footprint. Everything else will come easy.
Tony, these were some incredibly great tips that you threw out today, and I'm looking forward to future conversations with you. For all the viewers out there, check out our vodcasts and some of the additional expert Q&A recordings that we have on arrayasolutions.com, as well as our YouTube channel. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.